then we'll go to you. Okay. Okay, and while everybody's getting settled up here, I thought I would just sort of share, I guess, from a program planner's perspective. Over the past year and a half, I've had the pleasure of working with several of our state bar sections to plan CLE seminars. And, you know, every section I'm finding has their own strengths. As I had mentioned in my presentation earlier, I think one of the strengths that all of you have is that you come to us knowing what your members need for the most part and knowing which topics will be relevant to them. And I wanted to kind of bring up a couple of case studies because over the past year here, I've had the pleasure of working with Kate Schilling, who planned a seminar last fall with the public interest law section. It was Medicaid in the marketplace.
Right.
Yes. And then I also had the pleasure of working with Carrie Cox. The construction and public contract section has an annual program that they put on every spring. And I was very impressed with how put together their section is when they put theirs, when they get everything together. As I had mentioned before, both of these groups came to me with their content clearly defined, who they wanted speaking clearly defined. But, and I thought I would start with Kate and sort of talk about how did you get to that point? Because what you brought to us was absolutely everything we would have needed. How long did it take you to plan and put together? It was a full day program. And how long did it take for you to put together your group? What process did you sort of go through to get to the topics that you ultimately chose?
Yep. I'll first say that I wasn't the primary person planning it. So Sarah Pizzalakis was, and she did a really great job on that. I was part of the planning process, but one of the things that we took a look at was what was a hot topic. So that was something that was mentioned earlier. So at that time, the Medicaid estate recovery rules had just changed. The marketplace was new, and so everyone wanted to learn how the marketplace interacted with Medicaid marketplace or how people became eligible. So we took a look at all of those hot topics, and we had a lot of really great ideas. So people were kind of coming to the table. We had our phone conversation first to kind of try to narrow down the ideas because we had so many. And then as luck would have it, Disability Rights Wisconsin and GWAR, Greater Wisconsin Agency on Aging Resources, and ABC for Health. Some of us were actually on the public interest law section. So we tapped into some internal resources that we had between the different entities, and it worked really well because that was exactly what we did in the course of our role. So that's what we did, and then we also, I wasn't involved in the planning of the special guest speaker, but there was a guest speaker who came from out of town. And my understanding is that the public interest law section paid half of that person's travel expenses, and then Disability Rights Wisconsin paid the other half because they were using the speaker in another way. So it was kind of a really interesting partnership, and it was also a way that they were able to really make the most of a speaker who was coming from, I think, New York,
Yes.
maybe. So they were paying for airfare and also hotels and meals and things like that, but they really were able to make the most of it. And then that also goes to marketing, as was mentioned earlier, is you were able to market that a big speaker from another state was coming on board. So we had an amazing attendance on that CLE. We were actually spilling out into other rooms, and then we didn't have enough chairs for people, so it was really exciting to actually see that. The one thing I think that my tip would be for future, for people planning other CLEs, it would be make sure that you've specifically laid out whether your CLE is for beginners or advanced practitioners, because we were speaking about Medicaid that day, and we were speaking about estate recovery and some other issues, but some of the people that showed up didn't have some of the underlying foundational principles, and so there was a little bit of uncertainty about that. So I think next time we do a health-related CLE, we'll make sure to specify exactly what we'll be teaching to, or the other thing I've seen done is kind of two different tracks, the advanced and the beginners, and I think that's worked well too.
And we can work with you to do that. If you ever find yourself in that, I mean, this room actually splits up nicely, and we've been able to do that for a couple of other programs throughout the year. So yes, and I just want to reiterate it. They had everything together, everything that we possibly could have needed, and when we had the questions for Scott, as far as for marketing, as far as what their target audience was, and they were just spot on, and could run their elevator pitch anywhere, and it was very clear who it was intended for. And I want to move on to Carrie, because the construction public contract section has had, gosh, you've had this seminar for decades. I mean, that's a long-standing program for your section. And again, they're a very well-oiled machine. They come to us knowing who their presenters are, knowing who, or who they'd like to get for their presenters even, and knowing what their focus is. And this past year, you talked about building Wisconsin's mega projects. And now you hold that seminar off-site. Can you speak a little to what that is like for you? Because you have to do things over and above just calling the State Bar and saying, I want this space here at the State Bar.
We do it off-site. It is a long-standing program, and it's been in the section long enough that the person who takes it over the next year has a lot of guidance
Yes.
from the folks that have been there before, so you're not learning, everything brand new every year. We do it off-site. We do it at Pewaukee Country Inn, and the reason we do that is that our membership is spread throughout the state, and we don't want to lock into either Milwaukee or Madison, because then you tend to alienate the folks that aren't necessarily in that city. So we try to find an in-between location, which for us has been Pewaukee Country Inn. It fits within our budget. It's easy to get to. It's easy to find. If someone has to stay over, the hotel's right there, and it's a reasonable cost.
Now, what's interesting about your particular event is they actually bring in sponsors on their own to help offset those costs. Can you speak a little to, I mean, is that a formal process, an informal process? Is it people on the board reaching out to their contacts, or is it?
It's informal, and it is the board members reaching out to their contacts. One of the things we try to do with our seminar is to not isolate it to the lawyer community or to isolate it to the firm or to in-house alone. We want a broad spectrum of folks to be interested in what we're doing. So that would include in-house attorneys, that would include law firm attorneys, that would include business people.
Yes.
We want to get business people to our seminar as well. One, because if they can spot legal issues, it helps us be better lawyers for them. And also because it, in a way, is marketing to those folks. What do you need in terms of your legal counsel to be successful as a business? So it's a very strong partnership between the business community that actually builds the projects, that designs the projects. And for example, this year, our seminar, which is typical, would have an architect, an engineer, several lawyers. We mix those topics in order to reach a broad audience.
And let's finish real quick with a discussion of how they're reaching their audience, because as you can see, these are two sections that reach out over and above, beyond their membership, and frankly, beyond a lawyer attendee list. Can you speak briefly to what it is, how it is that you reach out to communities outside of the bar? I know that you've worked to develop flyers before. Is this something that you're forwarding emails? Is it formal, informal? Are you pulling a list that we're mailing to? How are you reaching your target audience outside of the bar?
For us, it's all of the above. We do a flyer, and then we use that flyer in multiple ways. We look at what associations are associated with construction and public law contracting, and then we get them to put that on their news cycle or on their newsletter cycle, and to spread the word that way. We also use the State Bar email list. We also make sure that our board members are talking to their firms and getting their firms engaged, and their clients, talking to their clients and getting their clients here. So we do all of the above.
Okay. And Kate?
We have, I don't know specifically how we've marketed to non-lawyers, but we have gotten a lot of requests in the past that paralegals be allowed to attend, and that was one of the reasons why we opened it up. Also, when we're doing a health insurance CLE about Medicaid or Medicare or Marketplace, we find that consumers have a general interest in that as well, and that's why we've allowed their attendance, and they have a really interesting perspective. And sometimes we've had non-attorneys speak, and so again, that's something that is value for the consumer as well.
Well, I'd like to reiterate that these are two sections who always have their content well put together and have a very well-defined audience that they want to reach. And the fact that they're able to let us know that very early in the process helps us with our success to make sure that we're targeting the program not only to the right attorneys, but the right folks right outside of the bar. So we thank you for that.
Thanks.
Thank you.
This very last part of the program is an opportunity to get some feedback from you, not only about our success or failure in modeling the best practices that we've been talking about today, but how to move forward with the professional development department and sections in creating CLE. I think the hope was we've given you a better sense of the range of things that we can bring to the table than perhaps you were aware of. And So to the extent that you have other questions or feedback, Natalie, did you have other direction you wanted to give?
Well, and really the idea at this point is to talk about, we've got great materials in the packet that have been provided to really help with the planning of the programming, and now opening up for discussion. Any questions about what type of CLE planning would be best for you, Pinnacle program versus membership services? What are the different options in terms of revenue generation, splitting revenues, things like that? And so questions that are related to those different issues, some of the things that we can talk about in the remaining time.
Can I make one comment as you grab the question? Sure. And this was not solicited, by the way. We've had an evolutionary process. Well, I just don't want someone to think they paid me to say this, because that's not the case. We've had an evolutionary process at construction and public law where we have used the state bar in the past, and then we used our own marketing people, and now we've done Pinnacle. And I can't say that that effort and that history was not without struggle and frustration. And we came back to the state bar this year using Pinnacle with some trepidation, because we'd had some past state bar experiences that weren't so good. There has been an evolution at the state bar that has been tremendously positive on these programs and how to put the programs together and the cost. And so don't be afraid is really my message. And this year we used Pinnacle for the first time, and I can say we were absolutely, our expectations were met and exceeded. The cost was reasonable, and there's no reason not to make use of these resources, even if you've had a bad experience or a less than positive experience in the past. Seek it out, look at it. It's a very, very good option, and we were very pleased with using them this year.
Thank you.
Yeah, my question sort of goes to your comments, Carrie, and I'm just interested, we're in the process of putting together a CLE right now for the appellate practice section, and I guess we have a decision to make early on, and whether you're going to go with Pinnacle or not go with Pinnacle. And what does that mean exactly? Why would we not? What are the benefits and drawbacks? How would it be different if we did versus not using Pinnacle?
I would suggest that the single greatest advantage of using Pinnacle is, or the State Bar's resources, is that you are able to capture the content of your program for those that are not able to participate in person. One of the things that we've learned over the last year and a half is, in particular, working with sections, that when it's a Pinnacle program, we will webcast the same time, live. We'll webcast live. But with section programs, our tendency is not to. So that way you have the in-person attendance that is really tends to be the greatest reason for doing the CLE in the first place for the sections. So we will capture it, though, and then we can carry your message on, and it'll live for 2 more years beyond the day that you run it. When I first met, 3 years ago when I first started with, at the State Bar, that was the very first thing I said at an SLC meeting, is I'm so disappointed that all this great content is going away. And so what is the biggest advantage is we can capture it for you and make it have another life, another window like the Hollywood programs do. They go on DVD, they go on pay-per-view, same thing. It's the exact same concept.
Yeah, the multiple audiences. I would say for our section, because we had gone through multiple iterations of doing these programs, and I ran the program this year, it was just the ease of not have to do I didn't have to do everything. It took so much off my plate from the prior, I co-chaired the prior year, and I gotta tell you, the 2 months running up to that seminar were just painful, because I do have a job, and it was really hard to get anything done without a lot of effort, and using the State Bar proved to be very cost effective and very time efficient. And I would say for our section, those are huge things, because we're busy people and we have a lot to do.
To tie it into what we talked about early on with the goal setting, what's the goal of this particular program for your section?
Our goal is, again, we want to bring together the business folks, the community, and our section. We want to drive lawyers into more competency. We want to make sure that new issues, emerging issues are being presented in a way that people are going to say, oh, I have to learn more about that. And we also want to provide an environment for networking, which is why we do a reception afterwards, so that people, lawyers talk to each other, clients talk to lawyers, and it's it's kind of a full bloom opportunity for folks to be in a room with other people like themselves and unlike themselves as well.
And does it tend to be a break-even program? Is
Oh,
it
no, we actually
revenue
we
generating?
generate revenue because we do the sponsorships, and how we do our sponsorships is to get our speakers set up, get the program set up, and then if there's an interested association that's associated with some construction or public law aspect, we ask them to be part of the program. And their benefit is that they get to be in the same room with all of these industry experts, and they get to have exposure to people that might use their services as well. Engineers, architects, contractors. So they want their name out there, and it's a way to get their name out there. And that supports not only that program in the reception, but it allows us to do scholarships and to do donations to the bar for other for example, we sponsored part of the annual program this year with a reception. So it allows us to do all those extra things we wouldn't do normally. We're also in the fall going to be going into the law schools, and I haven't talked to Marquette yet, so we've already cleared Madison, to get in front of the students with our association on a seminar and to say we also want to provide like a mini scholarship or stipend to introduce you to construction law if you tell us why you're interested. So give us a paragraph, we'll pay somebody for writing that paragraph at the back end. So it allows us to do those kinds of things.
Other questions?
Let me get you right over here.
Thanks. Our section in general has been very happy with the Pinnacle support we've had, but I just want to take this opportunity to bring up two negative things, only to see if they're just aberrations or what the situation is. We had one CLE where it was not taped because the videographer became ill, and there was just no backup, evidently, for him. He couldn't arrive, and so the session was not taped at all. We had another one where we thought we had advanced scheduled it for an adequate time, and then we were told we would not have support, and in the end, we simply canceled it and rescheduled it for this November. I don't know if those two are just like aberrations, if there's any backup plan. I just thought I'd raise those, because while we've gotten excellent support in general, those are two disturbing instances that we faced.
Yeah, absolutely, and they were disturbing for our team as well. You know, the State Bar operates on a very, we don't have excess capacity. We don't have an entire audio-visual department with a recording studio and all that. We have 3 people on our media team that do everything from the webcasting to capturing to recording to post-edit to pre-production, all that stuff. That is like that's the phrase I was looking for, bare bones. So, you know, unfortunately, your experience with at least, you know, the illness and someone not being backed up, while, you know, that's not the norm, it's not the first time, and it won't be the last time, because we aren't an AV company. We're the State Bar, and we try to capture, you know, best we can. So
well, that particular incident was kind of a combination of things that it is an aberration. So
yeah.
We had another program that was going that had taken some resources too. So we had 2 programs going the same day that needed the
Yeah.
staffing, and then we had somebody that was ill on top of that.
Yeah.
So
But it's, you know, it's not like we've done Pinnacle programs where we haven't been able to capture them too, you know, because of hiccups that happen. So it's, you know, it's like you throw people in the mix and you never really know what's going to happen, honestly. And
you throw technology in the mix and you don't know what's
yeah,
going to happen.
yeah. So I appreciate that you shared that, and because I think that folks do need to know we're not perfect, and so things are going to happen, and things get scheduled over other things, and you know, we're people too. So while we do have it down to a science, to the extent that we can, I'm not going to pretend that we're not going to screw it up, because it happens, you know. It happens. It's just human. So, you know, we hopefully learn from that experience and try not to let the same mistake happen. But yeah, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. You know, yeah, we own it. Hiccups, we own it.
So if we were not going with Pinnacle, we'd be working with our section coordinator, is
That's
that
correct.
right? Yeah, we've done CLE programs like that in the past, and it has worked quite well. But of course, we no longer have a section coordinator.
You will.
We will, okay. What's that? Through today? Okay, all right, good, okay.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
okay, all right. So another thing that I'd heard, and Natalie, I think maybe you were touching on this before when you were talking about the transparency between Pinnacle and the sections, is that Pinnacle, at least maybe as it was arranged before, was supposed to provide a certain amount of free service to the sections. Is that the current arrangement, or is it more flexible, or
No,
what does that mean?
everything we've just talked about today that we can provide, we will provide to you. Whether you're doing a program, I think Barbara said it, and I know Tim said it, whether the program is something that you're doing with us or not,
Oh, great.
we will help you put your program I will go to your meeting and help you do I feel so strongly that everybody should have a CLE plan, the big picture one that I talked about. I'll go to your meeting and help your group walk through it. It's that important of a tool. And I'm not going to charge you back for my time, and nor will our planners or Tim charge you back for any tips on how to do good presentations, or you know, doing some investigation on who might have run a similar program in the past to help you out. I mean, that's what we do, and that's the value we bring to the table. So we're part of the bar too, and we want your CLE to be as good as it can be.
Yeah, no, this program's been very helpful, thank you.
Sure.
One thing I will say that we did not have good success with at our seminar was the electronic materials issue. I think we keep thinking, oh, the world's full of millennials and everybody wants electronic stuff, and that didn't work for us. And here's what I would suggest is keep going forward with the idea that you can offer electronic materials, but don't make that your only choice, because what happens is inevitably all these very busy lawyers show up without their electronic materials, and they're like, where's my book? And we're like, really? You didn't read your invitation? Really? So it's just human nature that there's going to be a number of people that are always going to rely on paper. I mean, we're paper people. Make sure you have both options available. That was a big disappointment in our seminar this year, is that we didn't have the books ready for people, and we heard about it.
You know, one way that we've addressed that at some of our seminars, particularly where it's like a full-day program and there's lots of course materials, people don't want to carry all that stuff. We have a printer that you can get a printer, or we have a printer actually on our team. You can just plug the flash drive in and pick the section that you want to print, and it will print it for you. And we make that available at every one of our seminars where we're giving flash drives. There's a printer there where someone can just walk up and print what they want off.
Yeah.
10 years from now, maybe it won't be an issue.
Yeah, no,
Right.
but we're aware of that, so.
Well, and we are seeing more and more people use their tablets and their devices to call up the materials. We're actually seeing it even starting to happen a little bit through when we have apps at our institutes. People are finding the materials that way, and that's kind of handy.
Oh my God, you could set up an app with your material, and then you could send it to them, and they could just load it onto their device. I mean, that would be so easy.
That's what we did for annual meeting and conference in the institutes, is the materials are available through the app.
And then available online afterwards. so
Yes.
you can download it.
Yep, and they stay as a PDF up there for folks that stays up there forever, Tony? Stays up there till 90 days of access for our programs.
For the regular seminars, for the institutes, they stay up.
Institutes are still out there. Yeah, so my head was on the institutes. Our average program, it doesn't matter how you've attended the program, you can go in and see an archived version of it. You log in as yourself on wispar.org, and you have access to that program. You can rewatch it and see it for 90 days. The materials for that program you should download within those 90 days if you're going to want to go back and use them as a resource. But
I think that's a great perk. I've done that myself, just to make sure I've understood exactly what the speaker was talking about, make sure I didn't miss any points. I think that's a really great benefit.
Now I know not to say, are there any questions?
Thank you so much. I hope we've modeled for you some of the best practices, and I'm pretty sure I personally have modeled for you some of the non-best practices for CLE. Thanks for making the time to join us today.
Thank you.
And I want to thank Trish and her staff and the guests for putting together all these great materials, because I think there really are some wonderful resources for moving forward that are going to make all the planning easier.
Thank you.